A lot of questions about KU football and KU basketball after the weekend that was. I'm a little more optimistic about where things are going, though, for KU basketball. We're going to break it all down on our biggest long-term takeaways from the weekend that was on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here, and this is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be breaking down our biggest takeaways from KU basketball losing to North Carolina and KU football losing to Arizona over the weekend that was. We'll also get into our GOATs of the game for KU football against Arizona in our third segment of the show. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So KU basketball, we're going to start right there and then move to KU football. But for KU basketball, I think my biggest takeaway from that game, the loss against North Carolina where they fell 87-74, I would say this: prepare for the starting off hot here. Prepare for the worst non-con record that KU has had in at least over a decade. We've been pretty spoiled with some of that. I mean, they've played some very difficult non-conference schedules year in and year out under Bill Self, and a lot of times they're getting through it with one loss or two losses, even despite some of the tough opponents they're playing. This one's really tough. You still play Duke. You still play UConn. You still have the Players era coming up. You still have a Missouri game on a neutral site. You still have at NC State. It's going to be tough to get out of this with just two losses at this point when you've already lost this first one to North Carolina, right? And so I actually went back and I was like, okay, when is the last time that Kansas has lost more than two games before the start of Big 12 play, right? I'm not saying losing non-conference games overall, because then that would count in NCAA tournament. That would count in when you would play like Kentucky in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. I'm just saying how many losses at the start of Big 12 play. So in the non-con before Big 12 play starts, Kansas hasn't had more than two losses in a non-conference slate that leads up to the start of Big 12 play since 2014. 2014. That team had four of them. And you go back and you think, okay, 2014, it's actually the 2013-2014 team, if I'm, being more specific. And what does that team have in common with this one? Okay, you're being led by a freshman, Darryn Peterson, that one Wiggins or Embiid, whichever way you look at it. That team was a very young team all around. This team isn't as young all the way around, but it's still very young. Think about it. If we're talking about who have been KU's top 7 players so far, Darryn Peterson is a true freshman. Flory Bidunga is a true sophomore who's in his first, season as a full starter. Marco Jackson is a sophomore and just missed a year of basketball last year. Bryson Tiller is a redshirt freshman. Cole Rosario in your starting lineup is a freshman. It's a very young team. There's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some bumps in the road. And I think that's what that 2013-2014 team showed us. And, you can look at that team and say, oh, they lost in the second round. Like, maybe that's not a great comp for what the end result was. But again, like, if they would have stayed healthy, if Joel Embiid would have been healthy, who knows how far that team goes. Maybe they still lose in the second round, but I would like to think that they at least make the second weekend. If not more, you would have been playing an 11 seed in the Sweet 16 at that point. So point being, I think, buckle in. I don't think we should have those same expectations that, hey, this is a completed product, this is a finished product. It's going to be, hopefully you win one or two of those games with some of the tough games you have. But if you have 3 losses going into Big 12 play, this is a team that is going to get better. Whereas you look at the last couple of years, it wasn't really a team that got better. Like, they were kind of a finished product at the beginning of the season when other teams were not. And I think it's going to be a little different with this year's team. So I just say, prepare yourself for that. Try not to overreact if it happens. If you keep losing these games by double digits, maybe that's another thing. But and I'll try to do the same, right? It's hard in the moment, certainly. But I still do have high hopes for what they can be once, this all kind of comes together there. Now, a lot of that, of where they're going to go, this is another kind of long-term takeaway here, is it's going to ride on the young former McDonald All-Americans that I wouldn't say are quite hitting right now, at least consistently. And that would be Marco Jackson and Flory Bidunga. Darryn Peterson has been as advertised so far. If you want to add Cole Rosario to this conversation and Jaden Dawson, you can too. And I think that's important. But with Flory and Marco specifically, I think Flory's the big one. Like Marco is your first guard off the bench, and he represents somebody who athletically should be somebody who can create his own shot and get to the basket and get to the hole. We haven't really seen that ability so far, but if he can find that confidence or level of play, it dynamically changes what this Kansas backcourt can be. Then you look at Flory Bidunga. Kansas is not a deep team at the center position or at the big spot. You have Flory, Tiller, and Mbia. And with Mbia, he's not really in the rotation. It is a thin spot in the front court for KU. So there's a lot riding on Flory to be a really good player for Kansas. All of our, talking points in the offseason about if we think this team is underrated and, maybe comparing it to like the 2009 Kansas team or comparing Flory as a sophomore to, Udoka Azubuike or Cole Aldridge or some of these big men in their jumps in year 2 at Kansas. It was on the idea that Flory was going to take that big jump. And I think we've seen moments where it's looked really good, like certainly in the opener. Obviously, you're way oversized for the other team. It looked really good. I would say in the Louisville game, he obviously fouled out, but in the moments he was there, it looked good against Louisville. And then in the other exhibition game against Forte State and then against North Carolina, it looked bad. So I think there's just a level of inconsistency there, which is not all that different than what we saw from last year from Flory. It just went under the radar a little more because he wasn't a starter. And it was like, okay, freshman, so it makes a little bit more sense. If this is something that continues all season, that's a problem for Kansas. If this is something where, he's just going to be inconsistent through non-con and it is going to, you're going to have your bumps, but it's going to develop him to where once you get to January, February, all of a sudden he is that consistent guy and go-to option, it's going to be okay for Kansas. And like, I think of, was it David McCormick's, I forget if it was his sophomore or junior year, he really struggled in non-con. And then McCormick was like money in conference play. I don't think he wound up on the All Big 12 first team. He might have been second team, but if you just looked at the conference only numbers, he probably should have been that year. And I don't know, again, like there's a success story of that kind of happening for KU. KU is counting on Flory Bidunga, and specifically I think it's on the defensive end, right? At the very least, like even if he's only given Kansas 6-8 points in a game, he needs to be a double-digit rebounder. He needs to be somebody getting 2-3 blocks per game, but not just the blocks, imposing his will that is preventing those easy buckets from the other team that we saw North Carolina get over and over again against KU. And certainly the pick and roll coverage was not great for him and other players too. It wasn't just Flory. But this whole thing of this working around Darryn Peterson, it only works if Flory Bidunga really did take that leap. If not, I don't know what this team really is, to be completely honest. So there's a lot kind of riding on that. I still do see some of the flashes in the moments there with Flory that make me think he can get there. It's just a question of if it happens or not. And then here's my biggest long-term takeaway, just more of a posing a question here. Would it behoove KU to start Bryson Tiller and let Cole Rosario come off the bench? Now, this is obviously where, as the head coach, as Bill Self, like he has to play a little bit of mastermind manipulator or, I don't know, psychiatrist a little bit, like as the head coach, in that, like, he knows the players better than we do. Would putting Cole Rosario on the bench, would that, hurt his confidence a little bit, where clearly you're trying to keep him confident or get him confident, and would that crush it to where then you couldn't get it back? Like, is it a long-term play to keep him in the starting lineup where you're going to go through some bumps and bruises right now, but it's going to keep him up, that you continue to kind of believe in him to where eventually it's going to work and it's going to pay off for KU? Or is it a situation where he's feeling too much pressure by starting, and by coming off the bench, maybe it does allow him to feel less pressure and come in and have a game where he hits a couple threes and then he starts performing well off the bench and then moves into the starting lineup with the newfound confidence? That can be different for different people. Some guys, thrive and we're doing one thing, and some guys thrive doing the other. So that's where Bill Self has to, figure that out in general. But if that is something, maybe you do tinker with putting Tiller in the starting lineup. And obviously the way Tiller has shot it so far, you could say, okay, what's the spacing going to be? But technically KU's got better shooting so far. I mean, they have from Tiller than Rosario. So theoretically, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think the biggest issue, if you're going to the two big lineup, whether it's the starting lineup or a lineup you're using a lot, is the lack of big depth, because then you only have one big behind them. Now, I will say last year when KJ Adams was hurt and KU was only big because Zach Clements was hurt at that point in the time too, it was like Flory Bidunga, Hunter Dickinson, and I'm trying to think who would have been the other big off the bench potentially for KU. But they still started them next to each other. So I think, and here's the other thing. I have no clue if this is actually something that they'd entertain this year, and there are no names floating around at this point in time. So this is not like me saying, oh, this is like what's going on right now. This is just me like completely speculating that when you look at the roster, if they do decide, hey, two big basketball is the way we need to go, they've added players at semester before. Silvio De Sousa, Sam Cunliffe, Bryson Tiller last year, which, side note, if Tiller would have been healthy last year, the way he looks, he might have actually like made that team better. Anyway, does KU try to, they have one more scholarship still open technically, no clue on what money could even be had at this point in time. But, if you do find your two big lineup is your best way to go, do you just try to add a body for the second semester? I don't even know. Could you find somebody to reclassify or something? Could you find like an international player, right? Because we've seen that be a thing, right? Where, I don't know, just kind of an interesting thought of, if KU could figure out a way to get it done, I think it certainly would make sense, but I'm not expecting that to happen. Nonetheless, I wouldn't be shocked if KU went to that. They've been getting killed on the defensive glass so far, getting hurt on the interior defensively. And you look at Trey White, he had really good rebound rate numbers at Illinois. It has not transferred over to Kansas at all. And I can't help but wonder, he was playing maybe more three at Illinois. He's playing some three and some four, but Illinois was a bigger team. Is he a better rebounder at the three than he is the four? And maybe that would help there a little too. So let's get to our biggest KU football takeaways. You're listening to Locked On Jayhawks, and we'll also get to our GOATs of the game. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and today's episode of the show is brought to you by Wayfair. The holiday season is right around the corner. I already see my neighbors, putting up Christmas lights. I need to get around to that, and that just means it's time to get your home ready. Whether you need more seating for guests or cozy new linens or fun serveware for holiday hosting, Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here to help you make your space shine. And the best part, you don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long. Up to 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas. And one of the beauties of Wayfair too is, as we are in the holiday season, like if you're looking to get somebody a gift, you can probably find something for it, whether it's, your mom, your significant other, like probably be able to find something on Wayfair because they have like everything up there. And if you ever hosted family for the holidays, you know how much a difference of a few new touches can make. And, people come over, oh, I love that. And, it just starts the whole get together off on the right foot. Wayfair makes that easy. Don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale for up to 70% off. That is WAYFAIR.com. Sale ends December 7th. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks and making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode here. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Okay, so big picture takeaways from KU football's loss to Arizona. While the loss to North Carolina was not great for KU basketball, it's early in the season, younger team. Also, you're afforded more losses in a longer season in basketball. There still are reasons to be optimistic. I think with football toward the end of the season, we keep seeing the same story, the close losses. It feels like the opposite. It feels like ultimate pessimism right now from the KU football fan base. And I guess my first takeaway here is this, and I don't even know if this is a takeaway. This is just kind of a reiteration of something. I've said this multiple times throughout the season. It doesn't make it any less frustrating. So I get it. I'm there with you. But I don't really think it's logical to expect the game management stuff to change unless it's actually coming from the top. Like it has to be an addendum from the top. So first of all, let's just get into the psyche here, right? Lance Leipold is winning all these national championships at the D3 level where he has the best team every year, right? I'm not saying like that, he was gifted the best team. He built the best team, and then he was the best team, and he maintained the best team, right? He gets credit for that. There is a difference, though. When you are the best team, you can afford to play games conservatively because you are better than the opposition. And so it almost does become like, hey, you have to go out of your way to beat us, right? That actually makes sense to me. In the college game specifically. NFL, probably not because the teams are so much closer together. But in the college game, I'm actually okay with that. Then you go up to Buffalo and, you're the best team in the MAC, and now you're at Kansas. And at Kansas, you are either below another team when you look at, maybe whether it's talent level or whatever, like if you're playing a Texas Tech, certainly. And then a lot of the other teams in the Big 12, it's like you're on the same par as them talent-wise. Like, Kansas and Arizona, I don't know, maybe Arizona recruits pretty well with the West Coast. Maybe that's a bad example. But, there's a lot of other teams in the Big 12 that Kansas is on par with, just in terms of, talent level of what you're bringing in via high school and the transfer portal. And so it does become about, winning on the margins. We've seen that. how many games does Kansas have that are close games? And how many of them have, I mean, they're 2-7 since 2024 in one-score games. And so you have a bit of an older coach here who it's worked for so long for him in the past, doing it that way. I just don't really see it changing. And you see the logic again in the postgame of, well, we were going to go for it, but Jalon wasn't going to be allowed to play. That'll be the excuse that prevents it from having the self-reflection of, hey, we actually should have just gone for it regardless. Isaiah Marshall's averaging, double-digit yards per carry. And we have Daniel Highshaw, who's a battering ram at running back, who's a senior in one of his final games at KU. And we've ran the ball pretty well. We have 170 rushing yards in this game. We've had a successful running game. So I just don't think it's going to change. We've seen it over and over again. Like, I've seen some people be like, you know what? If they can just figure this out, if they can just fix this, they got it wrong. That is what you were signing up for here. And so this is where I'm talking about where I think it has to be an addendum from the top. And the top can come in one of two ways to me. And maybe these are correlated in the same way in where the message is coming from. Either donors or from the athletic department, right? It either has to be like, do you, if you're the athletic department, do you hire a coach for Lance Leipold that just works on game management? That would be worth it to me, Do you, I don't know, make him sit in like an analytics course or something with somebody? I don't know. I don't know what it is, but that would be one way. Another way would be donor stipulation, and that could be filtered through the athletic department that gets to Lance Leipold again. So maybe it's kind of the same messaging, but that is something I'm a little bit worried about from this. In terms of, as you're looking to build next year's roster, you lose a bunch more seniors this year after you lost a bunch more seniors last year. You're going to really need to hit the portal hard this year. And you have a pretty good recruiting class coming in. You're going to need to keep that together. And what does this come down to? Money, right? You need money to do these things. Oh, and also Kansas is still finishing their football stadium. They need money for that as well. And so in a time where donations and money is as important as it has ever been, not just in the college athletics landscape, but for Kansas football as well, if the donor confidence is waning with how these games, I mean, not just that they've lost, but how some of these have happened and some of the game management decisions, does that allow the donors to be like, hey, I'll give you $1 million and you can go get some players, but I want it to come with, like, you have to take this analytic training course, or you have to hire this guy to be your game management coach or something like that. I don't know. Could that be a stipulation that you could do? That would certainly be interesting if that were the case. All right, our next takeaway here is Jason Bean is the best KU quarterback since Todd Reesing. Jalon Daniels would probably be number 2 here. If you were just arguing individual seasons, that becomes more of a different conversation. Like, would you throw the Carter Stanley season up there? I still would probably have the Jalon Daniels, one of them, but they're kind of incomplete with some of the injuries. And I do think it's close with Jalon Daniels and Jason Bean. It feels like Bean had some bigger moments, and maybe that's the difference here. It's interesting because Jalon wound up being the better quarterback than Jason Bean at one point in time, but let's not forget Jason Bean also won the initial competition between the two guys. And it's just funny, like, how these things ebb and flow so long. It feels like I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and we were kind of chatting, and we were like, it feels like Jalon is a good enough quarterback that Kansas should absolutely be in a bowl game with Jalon Daniels, more than good enough to do that. And it feels like it's, if you don't, then you fell short of what you got at the quarterback position. It also, you can understand why you're not getting like a 9 or 10 win season in terms of some of the key moments or the bigger games, that being the case. But overall, if we were listing the 10 biggest problems for KU football, I don't know that he would pop up on the list right now. Okay, our next one is, I think one of the top portal needs for this team in the offseason is going to be getting an explosive running back. Now, we haven't seen a ton of Harry Stewart and Johnny Thompson and the 2 true freshmen they have in with Thurman and Kelly, that maybe that is the MO on one of those guys. And maybe that is the answer there. And maybe, if you feel like one of those guys is the explosive back type, then maybe you get more of the, reliable or pound it type back in the portal this way. Or maybe you just feel good about where those guys are at, that those are going to be the guys. I'm totally okay with that too, if that's how you deem it to be. But I think right now, Kansas is missing an explosive back. I think they've had like, you look at the Arizona game, Kansas only had a 4% explosive play rate. That was in the 10th percentile. And when you look at them running the football, KU was getting like 1.8 highlight yards per rush, which is basically like the broken tackle yards, essentially. This has not been an explosive passing game, point being, for KU so far this season. When you look at or explosive rushing game, excuse me. When you look at their run explosion rate this year, 58th percentile, it's a number that's fine, but it just feels like for a Kansas team that wants to be built on running the football, it feels like they need that home run threat. And it feels like we haven't gotten that enough so far this season, to where I think, to me, that would be one of the biggest. If you could go out and get that explosive back that you can pair with a reliable back or somebody moving forward, I think that would be huge. And I think that is one bit. Like, I think if you put Devin Neal on this year's team, like maybe they do beat Cincinnati, maybe they do beat Arizona, right? Maybe that is the difference between those games. And then here's my last one here. This is a bit of a scary thought. I might actually be more excited for the defense next year than the offense. Trey Lathan, Blake Harold, Marcus Calvin, Dak Brinkley. There's at least some names. Austin Alexander, right? He hasn't had a great season, but he's young. There's at least some names coming back there that you hope for improvement. If there's no improvement, then that's a problem. But if there is improvement, I think I'm actually more excited for the defense than the offense. But that is scary because we've never seen a Lance Leipold defense finish like in the top 50 nationally. Okay, we're going to finish up GOATs of the game for KU against Arizona. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of LOJ is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. You can head over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Again, thanks for making this your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers here on the show. Let's get to our good and bad GOATs for the KU Arizona game. We'll give a good GOAT to Daniel Highshaw. Again, under 4 yards per carry, but he was super successful in the running game, just plodding forward for the KU offense, who overall had a decent game running the football in this one. I think as far as the offensive line goes, Enrique Cruz had the highest graded performance on PFF, 68.7, 87 in pass blocking. So we can give him a good GOAT. Kobe Baines had an 82 in pass blocking with a 66 overall. Some of the line blocking numbers aren't great for KU. None of them are bad. They're all just like, okay, you kind of just did your job. And then, they picked up 3-4 yards per carry for Kansas. I thought Pickett and Henderson can probably get a good GOAT for the offense here. And then when you're looking at the offense, as far as the bad GOATs go, I do think some points were left on the table when you go back to the game management stuff, right? I mean, that could have been an opportunity to score more. The 4th and 4th, the start of the fourth quarter, the 4th and 2 at the end of the game to try to kind of almost put the game away, so to speak. You look at the lowest graded PFF players, Bryson Canty. I mentioned him the other day. That felt like kind of missed opportunity there. 48 PFF grade. He nearly had that touchdown, couldn't hold on, had another drop later. Leighton Cure had a penalty. He had just a 51 grade on PFF. And just a 31 pass block grade. That was in 4 pass block snaps, so they tried to bring him back there. That didn't totally work. Amir Herring had just a 52 PFF grade and just a 30 pass block grade. So those are some of the rough ones for KU, at least on the offensive side of the ball. To the defensive side of the ball for KU, Leroy Harris had a 93 PFF grade, 34 snaps, so he certainly gets a good GOAT. For Kansas. He was all around the ball. He ended up with 4 pressures to lead KU. In terms of the pressure count, Dak Brinkley had 3, Jalen Todd, Bengali Kamara with 2. You had 17 pressures and 5 sacks in this game, and you still could not beat Arizona, unfortunately, for KU. Dak Brinkley gets a good GOAT. He has a sack and a half, his first and a half of his career. Austin Alexander, we mentioned him, young player, and he actually performed really well. 70 PFF grade. He had a 68 in coverage. He was targeted 3 times. He gave up just 1 catch, and it went for -1 yard. So it must have been a screen. And he had a 42 passer rating against. So he was good. Jalen Todd had a really good game. Obviously, he had the key penalty, but overall was good. He had some big stats. He had a couple sacks that were designed up. Did a good job disguising the blitz. And I think that was kind of apparent there. He was also targeted, 3 times in coverage. He gave up 2 catches for 25 with 1 pass breakup. And then Honestly, this was one of the better games for the KU DBs because DJ Graham, Jaleel Hurley are both graded higher than a 67. That was good to see Hurley get in there, by the way. He's somebody who could raise the ceiling of this secondary as well. And then Dak Brinkley gets one in there as well. I think the defensive tackles flashed at different moments, right? At some moments it was Tommy Dunn, other moments it was Blake Harold, other moments it was I don't know. There's DJ Withers was the highest graded on PFF, even though he had the worst tackling grade, but that was certainly up there. As far as the lowest grades here, Mason Ellis played just 2 snaps. He gave up the touchdown on the one blitz. So KU had him on 3rd and long, and they just got a wide open touchdown there. That's something where Ellis was playing so well at the beginning of the season, and then he had the injury, and since then he's kind of struggled. I don't know if it's still because he's playing through the injury, but they need to get him back healthy and ready to go. Kamara had a tough game, just a 28 tackling grade for Bengali Kamara. He missed 2 tackles, had 2 tackles, and he had just a 49.5 PFF grade. And then Alex Bray with just a 52 grade. One of the lower games for Trey Lathan, who's been great this year, but just a 54 grade. You wonder if that injury that he suffered during the game and then kept playing through certainly bothered him in this one for Kansas. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe. We'll see you next time with LOJ.